So my name is Andrews. I'm the hierophant of the Church of Witchcraft. Now I have to find my intro card. Oh, it's not even on now, that's cool. So my name is Andrews. I'm with the Church of Witchcraft. I help run all that stuff. There's a whole bunch of us doing stuff. Obviously you can see by our board, the Church of Witchcraft. That should be centered. And thank you, Alice, for doing all of those things. I appreciate it. And then we have a few guests here too today. So today we're going to be talking about our witchcraft, which is vocation, religion, or both. So it's witchcraft, vocation, a religion, or both of these things. And that's what we're going to be kind of exploring today. I specifically practice celestial witchcraft, which might look a little different for certain people. Some people are Wiccans, some people don't fall either of those categories, and this is about every modality of witchcraft that is available, and we always want more and treat you to do so as well. Church of Witchcraft, you can find us on our website, you can find our Discord, as well as our YouTube there as well. Okay, so, do you guys want to say hi as well? You can also, because we are recording, just so you know, so if you want to keep yourselves out of that, that's totally fine as well.
I'll just say hello from here. Hello.
Okay.
I can introduce myself. Hello, I'm Ghost. I'm Phantasma on Facebook and Ghost Kitty on Discord.
Excellent.
I'm just me.
You're just you? Well, you can find this other individual at Tyrannicide. I'll absolve the name for now because I haven't gotten confirmation that I can use your name. Okay, so is witchcraft a vocation, religion, or both things? So witchcraft to me is interwoven into life, primarily. There's not a separation for me. Some people do have a separation. I see things that, so let's take occult, O-C-C-U-L-T. Occult I kind of take as basically like witchcraft scientists, or basically divine scientists. They're not necessarily witches, but they explore a lot of witchcraft that already exists, or different systems that traditions might use, or other systems might use. Occultists may or may not be witches, but generally speaking, occultists are their own sort of blend. Cultists are just, let's break down our baggage about cult. So cult is basically just a small religious sect, and that doesn't really mean anything else. There's a whole bunch of terrible media, obviously, about cults, Heaven's Gate being one of my favorites to reference. And with those cults, they get a really bad rap because they're usually in opposition to society or the mainstream, or they're anarchists and they have some interesting ethos that goes awry. But cults are going to be, it can be either a group or an individual. I've said this in pretty much every single sermon. I talk about the individualized cult institution, which is the cult of the self, your own relationship to the divine. And that in that itself is a cult of you, not a cult of a bunch of people. And that's normal, it's okay. You can have a cult. It's what you do with it, it's what you do in any group. Any group of humans is going to get a little weird sometimes, and like there's going to be personality conflicts. So occultists and cults. To define those, I wanted to give you more of that information so that you would kind of understand where I'm going with what a witch is. A lot of times I ask people, what's a witch? And they can't answer me. Does anybody have any ideas or definitions on what a witch is? Could be something to think about that.
Spiritualist, someone that works with the elements. It could be a title of pride.
Okay. I hadn't considered that before. I've usually kept pride out of like all the things that I do. Not pride as an LGBTQ, but pride as in just like overt pride in things. I try to keep us as humble as possible.
I was going to say somebody who is an energy worker, but also works with nature and understands nature and the power in it. It's bending.
Okay. What do you mean? How do you define nature?
So nature to me is all the elements. Everything that you go out and you see, the trees, the birds,
Mm-hmm.
the elements of nature, so water, air,
Okay.
fire,
Right.
all of that. So to me that's nature. It's out there, outside of our concrete jungle, nature.
Okay. Is nature included in what I do? So if I'm doing celestial witchcraft and it's in outer space or the cosmos, is that nature?
I would consider it, yes.
I would as well.
Yes.
But a lot of people like plants and minerals and rocks and things. It's a good reminder. I totally forgot to turn my phone ringer off. But nature being that of anything that's external to man-generated things, and that we get into serious philosophical debate about what's generated by our species, because I'm not gonna get too off the rails. Do you have any idea on how you would define witch?
I haven't really said anything on the term myself. It's just very diverse from what I've seen.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. Sometimes I'll ask practitioners of 20, 30 years, I'll ask them, what's a witch? And they go, well, I don't know. I'm like, okay, so you've been practicing witchcraft for 2 to 3 decades, and you don't even have a rough approximation of what witch means to you. You might want to ask some questions and start getting a little familiar with it. And I also don't think there's any one answer. In general, the Church of Witchcraft is not going to say that there's one answer to what a witch is. We do have a flexible common practice, and so we kind of come up with some things that all witches do. For example, all witches primarily do rituals, right? All of us do ceremonies. Most of us have some sort of tradition, and a lot of us also will do spell work. Pretty much across the board of any modality of witchcraft, and so when we reference flexible common practice, that's kind of what we're talking about, is those things that are commonly shared. How they're done, and what the orthodoxy or orthopraxy is of a tradition or system, is independent to the individual or whatever group they're following. So like Thelemites are going to have their own orthodoxy and orthopraxy. Satanists or Luciferians will have their own kind of approach to that as well. I have my own approach to that. I'll talk about that a little bit later on. But what the trappings are of that will change based on the modality of witchcraft. It could be done with a whole big group of people, which could also be a cult, or it could be done with one person, an individual cult, right?
I have one more definition. Sorry, no.
Go for it.
Definitely healer.
Yeah.
I think a witch is a healer for sure.
I get a lot of healer stuff. And also feel free to interrupt. I'm just going to be on a runaway train following what I wrote down. So please feel free to interrupt. You can just raise your hand. That was a good reminder. If you have something to say and you want to interrupt me, just raise your hand and I'll immediately talk to you guys, because we're not in a room of like 500 people. And once we get to that level, then y'all are just going to have to deal with it, and you can just save your comments till later.
Okay.
But small organizations like this, we can just have a friendlier, easier conversation, right? So witchcraft for me is interwoven into my life. It is directing and shaping daily intention, right? Or nightly intention. Just when you're in existence in this realm, however, or any of the realms, it's how you're directing and shaping that with some of all those interactions. And that will be done with intent to manifest something. A very easy definition that I use for what a witch is, or how I define that, is somebody who manifest with intent internally or externally. Full stop. That's pretty easy enough that it's broad enough that it basically scopes everybody. There's plenty of other definitions that we could use with that. What I started wondering is the intersection of witchcraft and religion, right? Witchcraft and religion and science, right? Or jobs. There's a whole, like, how do these things engage and interact with each other? And I don't really know. I have some answers, I have some ideas, and I'll get to that. And if these things do intersect, right? So the intersection of witchcraft, religion, science, jobs, if all of those do intersect, how do they intersect together? How do they connect? And that led me to start figuring out, does my witchcraft, the celestial witchcraft, rise to the level of religion? Because I didn't know how to answer that, right? Now we know that Wiccan has its own stipulated practice, and it's the religion, right? So just for those people who might freak out about the Church of Witchcraft name, that we use the word church, but here's fun fact. Wicca is the church and school of Wicca. Wicca itself uses the term church in its name to define itself. So you guys are using it a lot still. So we're just doing broader strokes, not just specifically Wiccan. So we're going to keep revising and challenging some of those preconceived notions that we have about terminology and what they mean to us. I just had a conversation literally while I was at coffee before now. Somebody was saying, well, why do you use Christian titles to name the people who run your church? Well, frankly, the easiest thing is that do we really want to have to explain what all of our titles is? If we come up with brand new titles, then we have to go about explaining those, and it makes it even more strange. It's a term; those are terms that people can understand, they've heard before, and they go, oh, that's what that is. So they have some context for that, and that's partly why I use it. But also it has to do with charity stuff and nonprofit stuff, and we're just playing the US game. that's what we have to do to make it work, so that's what we did. We try to keep our titles out of it as much as possible because that's not our focus. Our focus is the individual first and foremost. So, with my craft rising, does it rise to the level of religion? First I had to figure out what was a vocation, and I also had to figure out what religion was. So I had to determine what vocation was and what religion was. Vocation, in Merriam-Webster's amazing dictionary, is a summons or strong inclination to a particular state or course of action, especially a divine call to religious life. So I'll read that again. So defining vocation, a summons or strong inclination to a particular state or course of action, especially a divine call to the religious life. And so I went, that sounds pretty right. So for me, witchcraft is a vocation under this definition, right? I have a summons or strong inclination. Strong inclination is, who thinks, what's another term we can use for strong inclination? Starts with an I.
Intention?
Close.
Invoking?
Intuition. Strong inclination is intuition. Now, obviously, for whatever reason, I don't see Merriam-Webster using the word, intuition in this, but strong inclination to me may be intuition. It could be a suggestion from an outside source, and specifically a summons. I found that a very odd way to phrase that. A summons to a particular state or course of action. And a summons could be your interaction with deities, your interaction with elements, having a cause to do this, summoned to do this, a call to that, and especially a divine call to religious life. And religion, again, we're going to be kind of breaking down some of these terms that we have, right? Religion, a little scary, right? A lot of people come from Christendom, or they come from other different faiths, and that religion has some contextual baggage, right? Control, patriarchy, loss of boundaries, no questions, right? Those kinds of things. We're not about that. Church of Witchcraft has no interest or energy to even handle that and tell you how to live your lives, because we don't have enough energy. I have to do my own craft in tandem with doing the Church of Witchcraft and my coven and all of those things. There will always be separation of church and coven. Coven is always going to operate autonomously, and that means any grouping of witches, whatever that name might be. So this divine call to religious life for me, it started at the beginning when I was really young, but it was kind of fuzzy. And as you go through life, you start making these definitions, you start picking apart these things, you suddenly get this kind of idea about this religious life. Now, what is the difference between a career or job and a vocation? Any ideas?
Job is what you do, a career is actually something like you plan for, and
Okay.
went to school for.
All right, I like that. That's a good separation.
Yeah, it's your career path. That's what you set your whole life out to do. So some people, their career, they want to be an attorney. Go to
Right.
school for it. They practice.
Right.
Everything for that. A job, you can go get a job. Job
Right.
is anything.
Right.
Career is a little different. It's a little more specific than just a job.
Okay. Any other ideas?
I'd love this, I feel like I'm at school. Nothing's coming to mind.
That's okay. If you don't have anything that comes to mind, that's all right too. Any ideas? So I would go with what you said. It's kind of how I view job, career. Job is basically anything that can generate money or earn money of some iteration. And that may or may not be a career. You could use, if you're in your career, it is also your job. But career and job both don't have this divine calling, this responsibility or this call, this rise to religion, right? Oh my gosh, if your career is religion, please be attached to some organization that has some religious stuff. Don't just religiously follow being a doctor, or religiously be a veterinarian. That gets some strange distinctions and can burn you out way too fast. But job and career don't have that religious drive or that impetus from that. Now, priests who do this for their career, right, or other clergy people or whatever, their vocation is also their career, which is also their job. Sometimes they take a vow of poverty. Sometimes the church pays them, or their organization pays them. It depends, right? So you can have your vocation become basically your job if you wanted to. So now I had an idea of what vocation was for me. I had an idea of this religious kind of component to that. Now, defining religion was the harder one. And by the way, there is no exact one definition. There's actually 3 inventories that I have come across. There's a 5-item inventory, an 8-item inventory, and a 10-item inventory. I don't have the 8 and 10 with me, but I have the 5 because there's so much reading and so much knowledge that we're trying to parse that the more complicated you get, the harder things are going to become, because then you have to break them down even further, getting into finer and finer definitions. This was broad enough that would be easily understood by a lot of different people. So I'm going to use Clifford Geertz's his definition of what religion is. He states that a religion is a system of symbols which acts to establish powerful, pervasive, and long-lasting moods and motivations in humans by formulating conceptions of a general order of existence and clothing these conceptions with such an aura of factuality that the moods and motivations are uniquely realistic. There's a lot of pieces. That was actually one sentence. They were different back in the 19th century, apparently. They were making all sorts of words. But there's actually 5 major components that I will bring into this. I'm going to read that one more time, and then I'll break that down into those 5 components that Mr. Geertz lists. So defining a religion, a system of symbols which acts to establish powerful, pervasive, and long-lasting moods and motivations in humans by formulating conceptions of a general order of existence and clothing these conceptions with such an aura of factuality that the moods and motivations are uniquely realistic. So now that I had a better definition, I'm going to break this down and it'll start making a little bit more sense here. I have an idea of what vocation was. I had an idea of what religion could be and how I could kind of attest these things. Of those 5, the 5 major items within that inventory: 1, system of symbols; 2, establishing powerful, pervasive, and long-lasting moods and motivations; and 3, formulates conceptions of general order of existence; 4, these conceptions are clothed in factuality; and 5, these modes and motivations are uniquely realistic. So those 5 are the inventory that I'm using to define what religion is. And that gives us a pretty solid idea of how to kind of get behind what religion is. Even acting in our ministry, our clergy members have some challenges with this because in the court, I'm sure that we're going to get some tax nonsense in the future. But to do that, we've made sure to document everything and move everything so that it's very obvious, because in a court of law, there's no specific definition, or at least in the US, there's no definition of what a minister is. They don't have one. There's like a 13-item list that says if you're doing the majority of these things, that you're acting within a sacerdotal function, and indeed you are actually a minister. There's no rhyme or reason to who ordains or what paperwork you have to sign. It doesn't exist. Basically, somebody just starts a thing and just says, this is a religion now, and they just go from there. But the more of those items that you do, the better you can prove that you're acting in a sacerdotal function. So us doing lunar rituals, us doing these sermons, and those things are acting in our sacerdotal function. Listening to people in our chronicles, good segue. Chronicles are things that we don't want confession because you guys didn't do anything wrong, right? What sins do you have to confess? We're not all about sin and the guilt and all that stuff. Like, that doesn't exist. But we decided that Chronicle would be the better option for us. And that's so that people can be listened to or heard. They can tell us about their cool new pet, or they can tell us about challenges they might be having in their life at a Chronicle. They can request time with us, and in fact, that just happened. And so somebody's actually, one of the Cardinals is doing a Chronicle right now. But we're going to be doing this consistently every single week. There's going to be an hour window in the evening that's going to be about this Chronicle. It'll be in a group, and if you need to split off, you can reserve time with one of the clergy, and we'll listen to what you have to say. What problems do I have? I will say as a point of business on that specifically, we are mandatory reporters. If we have concerns, we do have to report that.
So it's not confidential?
It's confidential insofar as much as mandatory reporting goes. Like if there's an immediate threat to self or immediate threat to others, then we have to report that because we're mandatory reporters, or threat to other people or harm that's going. So if somebody comes to us and they say, we're going to do this terrible thing at this public location, we're absolutely going to tell stuff about that. But that chronicle is going to be private between those people, save mandatory reporting reasons and following that lay of the law. And if you have more questions, by all means, feel free to ask us. So back to our original point, defining our vocation, we have an idea. We define religion, and now we have a better idea of what that can look like as well. So how did I arrive at my religion? So I didn't start thinking of celestial witchcraft or witchcraft really as a religion. I had some ideas, some assumptions or concepts that were kind of like, is this a religion? Is witchcraft a religion? How does that make sense? What causes that to occur? And that really only happened about 3 years ago when this whole organization started forming, and we went, oh yeah, we're gonna have to like answer that question, or at least have some sort of idea of what we're talking about. But I started practicing witchcraft, arguably, since I was a child. I mean, at what point does somebody start their witchcraft, right? Does somebody introduce you? Do you just pick stuff up? I mean, it could be a mixture of those things. I remember back to about 9. I'd been doing stuff with family and that sort of stuff. They'd been doing tarot readings and they'd encourage that. So those are occult technologies, and some of those are seen as witchcraft, but aren't necessarily relegated to just witchcraft. Like an occultist or occultist could do. They can use things that appear to be witchcraft, right? But they're not necessarily witches. I'll get there in a second. But at 9, I started doing some more of that stuff. I was encouraged to read pendulums and that sort of thing, and it kind of blossomed from there, and I've been doing it ever since then in various intensities. At 21, I decided to dedicate myself to the craft, knowing absolutely nothing about what I was doing. I had no guidance, nobody around, or any of those things, which shaped some of why the Church of Witchcraft even exists, because I wanted other people to join in and feel seen and have that option if they so wanted it. Instead of just practicing alone and just going, man, I wish I had some people around me to also witness this and be a part of this and celebrate together. And so that's part of our motivation to do that. So at 21, I did this dedication. I just came up with, I looked up some spells and stuff, and I just sort of put together this vague ritual, and nothing happened. That was the biggest thing. So I thought, until I woke up the next day, and the next day, everything looked like it was colored outside the lines, and that happened for like 48 hours, and I was very concerned. And I went, I guess I did a thing. And so since then, that was my formal dedication by myself, and then I did a rededication 11 years later, because all of my stuff comes in basically 11-year cycles for what I've been doing, 9, 20, 31. So suddenly I start seeing these patterns emerge. But we can debate as to why, or talk about more about why that is the way it is for me at another date. So Celestial Witchcraft then started formulating, because I told the Covenant of Insight asked me, I said, guys, I think I practice with celestial stuff. I think I might be a celestial witch. To which there's a resounding response of, you didn't know that? Apparently I'd been doing this and I had no idea, and I didn't have a name. And my point to this is that people can take the title of witch, and the witch is the vocation or possibly the religion that you're working with. And from that, the word that precedes witch, right? So celestial witch, green witch, kitchen witch, is your definition. That first moniker is about what kind or what form your witchcraft is taking. So it's shaping that vocation and or religion inside of your own definition. So celestial witch, vocation, and then celestial being the format that this definition, that this vocation takes, and what tools it might use. It gives you some of that idea. So you can start with just taking on the term witch and not really having to define anything, and then start exploring from there. And that's about making that decision for yourself, saying, yep, I think I'm going to go ahead and follow witchcraft. I'm just going to do witchcraft, and it's okay if you don't have a beginning word. You may never have one, and it may change. Because I didn't have one for all that time until about 4 years ago when I realized, oh yeah, I do celestial magic, right. I didn't know that, and it took other people to help me find that. Again, another role that we're fulfilling. So in celestial witchcraft, we're going to use that inventory. And I encourage everybody to use this inventory for their own selves, right, of religion forming. So system of symbols, 100%. I know that for sure. So we're going to use these 5 inventories. So system of symbols in celestial witchcraft, all of the astrological symbols, whether they're asteroids or planets or transits, are in there. Using things like runic stuff or using alchemical sigils, and so all of those things are a system of symbols. So I very much concede that there is a system that is happening. Establishing powerful, pervasive, and long-lasting moods and motivations. I am so motivated by celestial witchcraft. Things that happen in my life I resolve with celestial witchcraft, or just witchcraft in general. And it's not just my own, but any witches that are watching this, that was a tricky sentence, or the people that are here now, you can sort of get an idea of what your witchcraft is going to be shaped by, how you respond to your life, whether that's I feel sad or lost or confused, or I feel happy and proud and excited. These are polarity objects that we can understand, and this witchcraft is what's motivating those things. I celebrate with that witchcraft. I draw power from those things. Like I've said before, liminal states are what we're drawing our power from, right? And these liminal states of emotions and these transient things are those liminal states. Formulating conceptions of a general order of existence. Celestial witchcraft, how does it do that for me? Formulating conceptions of general order of existence. I understand there's a relationship between what's in synastry or in horoscopes in general, that's all the planets and the asteroids and the transits and all that jazz. So all of that stuff is in a specific order that impacts life and shapes how I'm doing things. And so this is the order of how existence occurs, right? And this is not to say, there's a difference here, and I'm not gonna go into a long spiel about this, but there's a difference between cosmology and cosmogony. Those are not the same thing. I have a cosmogony, not a cosmology. Now the cosmology is the order of how did things come to be. So in like Norse traditions, Ymir the Screamer, I believe is his name, basically screamed the universe into existence, and then they chopped up Odin and his brother, I believe, chopped up a giant, and then that became, the blood became the oceans and all that stuff. That's cosmology. Cosmogony is the structure of those things. So there, you can have both, one or both of them. So for me, there's that general order of existence, because I generally think that most stuff is essentially nihilistic, which is a super disturbing place to hang out in, but, you know, I'm used to it. So I have a cosmogony, I have an order of existence, how things interact, how things balance with each other. One of our cardinals, I believe it's Joe, he thinks about fatalism. So he thinks about things in terms of that fate is already predetermined, but we can sort of aim where our choices are going to be and shape where that fate track is going to go, basically. But those tracks are already laid, and that's his order of existence. So, celestial witchcraft meets number 3. Number 4, these conceptions are clothed in factuality. I believe them to be 100% true and factual. I see evidence of this consistently, time and time again, day in, day out, with people, with the church and covenant, all of those things. I keep seeing these have impact and gravitas to them. So 4 is met. And 5, moods and motivations are uniquely realistic. I am absolutely motivated by these things at all times. Just before I came here, I was working with Moon and also Vesta, which is one of the asteroids, and how those two things interacted, and then what my behavior is going to be shaped by with that. And that's uniquely realistic. It has a specific gravitas to it. So all 5 of those items of inventory then answered from celestial witchcraft, provide me with the knowledge that yes, in fact, what I'm doing is religious witchcraft. So to me, that became my religion. It has been, and I've been doing these things, but I've been writing all these down in the celestial decks. It's a long story, but basically I'm writing these things down to understand how these interactions work, get a better idea, and really understand what it does, what these 5 things are, and flesh them out. How did you get to witchcraft? Ooh, tricky question.
I guess it started with me like meditating outside when I was really young. And it was probably after I watched The Craft when I was much younger. And my sister got an Ouija board and I was starting to learn about that. So I got a couple books at the library, of course Wiccan books, Gerald Gardner.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been doing it on and off, I think since middle school or elementary school, but definitely have been practicing more serious since the last 5 years. So
Lovely.
Since the 90s, when I was a kid.
Nice.
Yeah, the 80s and 90s since I was a kid. I've been drawn to it
Really?
since I was a child, yes.
What was it that drew you to it?
I don't know. just it was a feeling, and I always knew like I was different from the rest of my family members.
Mm-hmm.
I was always drawn to the supernatural.
Okay.
Just always, and growing up in North Denver, a lot of the houses there are haunted.
Love it.
So we had a presence in our house, and it never caused harm, but I always knew it was there. And then in my teens, and of course I was raised in a very religious household, so my parents, they recognized it, and they tried to keep a, religious rein on it. But then when I was in my 20s, I was like back at it, you know, so dabbling and
Yeah.
then kind of let it go and then came back to it like back in my late 30s, early 40s.
Good.
So since I was a child, I've been drawn to it, but the side that I'm on is more green
Okay.
and kitchen witchery, but also everything paranormal, everything supernatural, just because I've grown up around it.
Got it.
Yeah.
So more spiritualism practices, ancestral work probably, something along those lines. Okay, cool, thanks for sharing. Tyrannosaurus, how about you?
What is the question again?
What drew you to witchcraft?
Just curiosity, pretty much based on inconsistencies. I've had a background of a lot of scientific related studies and such, but I like to account for the things that cannot be explained, and I just have like an infinite curiosity in that, and certain things that I notice going on, just connectivity with the planet and everything that's going on around me. Certain things that are just way beyond coincidence that I've picked up on, and recently I've been trying to isolate a little bit, but it just keeps rearing its head. You're like, that's not going to happen.
Right, you're just gonna get drawn to that, and those are great, all of that is a great segue into sort of my next point, is that some people come to me and they talk to me about like, oh, I wanna do witchcraft as my religion. I'm like, why do you want religion? And they say, and it's not that I'm gatekeeping, it's I want them to think about it because it's a choice, right? It's a big thing in your life to decide I'm gonna do this thing and be consistent. And they tell me very often, the response is, I want community. I'm going to tell you now, community and religion, you can have a community without religion. You don't need religion to have a community. They do end up sort of connecting, and born of religion comes community because there's a common practice that's between those people. They understand that. And so community is born from religion in some instances, but you can get a community without religion. So if your only reason to like find a religion and join religion is to find a community, you might want to find a deeper reason. And that deeper reason is exactly what the three of you are also talking about. And what I've mentioned before is that there's a unique experience that has no viable alternate, right? There's just something that is a unique experience that there's no alternative explanation. You have some drive, some motivation, back to that vocation concept, right? That suddenly I just have to do this. That you have exhausted all of your options. And I've talked about this in an earlier sermon as well. Who do I turn to in times of crisis? Who do we all turn to in times of crisis? And this is when I started, I try to start from, this route. What are the answers? If I'm feeling sick, is it my diet? Am I not sleeping enough? Or is it people around me? And once I've exhausted all of my options, the last thing that I had, the last effort, and I'm going to tell you this quick story as well, that was religion. Another really easy one that may not be necessarily a crisis situation, but I know one of a witch that I know went up to the top of the mountain, and they had this religious experience, which wasn't tied to any sort of, hierarchy or, formed thing. It was their own gig, and they went up to the mountain, the sunrise came up over the mountain on the horizon, and they didn't have any other thing that they could do except they just started singing. They had no other relevant response, and that was the best thing they knew how to do. And so that is the religious experience. If that hasn't occurred for you, and it may never, and it may at some point, the more that you're in tune with whatever it is you want to focus your religion around, or your efforts, your divinity around, that religious experience can arise. And that could be from a deity or an element or whatever. It could come from a time of crisis. But those things are what I would classify as a religious experience. And until something like that happens, you may just want to practice and see what's around for you first. Pick up some of the tools, some of the occult technologies, and see, what does this do, right? And that can lead to a religious experience, ergo leading to your own religion, whether that's a group religion that's already formulated or your own. Recently, I've had a current challenge that my reticence to leave my house and engage with other humans has been quite a bit higher, and like my normal strategies, the normal things that I do to assuage that, going shopping later or not, doing certain things. When I can't go to a parking lot, when I see a whole parking lot that's full, I just keep driving, and I'm noticing that's happening more and more frequently for me. in Eyes of a Witch, that observation, I realized that my original strategies in this realm were no longer sufficient to manage that kind of concern and those responses. And I didn't know what else to do. I tried everything in this realm, so I was like, you know what? What do I do? So I called my mom, right? Not my religion, but my mother. I called her and I said, what do I do? And she was like, hey man, listen, I'm right there with you. I don't know. She just said, meditate more. I don't have an answer. You're right, we're in the same boat at this point. I went, oh, that's not great. Now I've run into like the end of my mother's like advice on this. And so I started building a prayer kneeler, and I started building, and that kneeler became a whole project, which turned into now building a whole chapel in my backyard. That's a whole other long story, but that was my response. I had a crisis situation. What did I turn to? I turned to the celestial court, all the planets and all that stuff. And I started working in that realm and being consistent, and it has alleviated much of that anxiety. So again, that witchcraft that's interwoven into my life is a component of that, and that is that religious experience. Meditation in the dark, when I restore myself and my magic for witchcraft on dark moons and that sort of thing, I can feel a replenishment. I can feel a restorative process, and because of those experiences, celestial witchcraft rises to the level of religion for me. The community is great. I like hanging out with all you guys. I like whoever's listening out there, and all of that's great. But it's born from the religion that was my own personal experience. I wasn't granted some divine, thing that said you must be the leader of a church. It had nothing to do with that. It was simply because I wanted there a place for the community to be able to celebrate together and have these kinds of conversations and answer those questions that were all sort of, and even just ask them, not even necessarily answer them. Because that's sort of your own gig, is to answer these things, and we'll do our best to assist that. So does it have to be a religion? Does witchcraft have to be a religion? No, it doesn't. Like I said, occultists aren't religiously witchcraft, right? Cults may not necessarily practice religious witchcraft, right? You can just have witchcraft in your life and just do witchcraft, and you don't actually have to have it be a religion. It is attached to, for me, those experiences, those unique experiences, and it goes back to those definitions of that 5-item inventory that tells me, indeed, it is a religion for me, but it may not be for every witch. Even if they're practicing for decades, it may never rise to the level of religion for you. It may not become that serious, and it may never occur, and that's okay. Like I said, Wicca is a religion. Witchcraft may be a religion, but that's a choice to turn your witchcraft into a religious practice. And this comes from I'm going to get that in a second, but I'll touch on that right after this. So some people perform witchcraft, but it's not a religion. Some people perform witchcraft, or things that are seen as witchcraft, and there are witches that aren't religious. In immediate responses to religion, challenge your ideas and your kind of baggage around the word religion. Religion isn't just the Christendom. It's not just hanging out in a church doing ecclesiastical stuff. It's not just that. Religion is your own work. Can be. It could be your own work and your work with a group. It could just be a solitary practice. It doesn't really, it's how you go about this. That religious stuff comes from that 5-item inventory. That's why I had to look at it, because there's no Church of Celestial Witchcraft. There's no Bible for it, or any witchcraft. It doesn't exist. So then what is religion? Religion is that inventory that I'm using to describe that and give an articulation so I can understand better why I'm doing the things I'm doing, to give motivation, to give some sort of understanding and articulation of what it is that I'm doing and give it meaning and bring it to life. So how does religion impact me or influence my witchcraft? When I say religion, I think about that definition, those 5-item inventory component, but also specifically it comes with a devotion, discipline. And these things I would reference as piety. And I can't say this for sure, but at the moment, of the witches that I know, I'm probably the most pious. And that's not like toot my own horn. It's literally that every single morning I have a rising prayer, I have an eventide prayer every single day. I open the chapel and I close the chapel every single day. I do this all the time. I write about it, I read about it, I research prayer and ritual and all of those things. So for me, it's that dedicated and disciplined practice that's happening. And anybody can become pious. It's about those two components of devotion and discipline to your witchcraft. And that goes back to your self-esteem and your self-respect, because then you can trust yourself to show up for that thing. And that devotion and discipline and that piety is not necessarily to a deity, to get power from the deity. It might be. For me, it's not. For me, it's the devotion and discipline to myself, to my craft, and showing up and giving that respect, and I can develop that trust in myself, because I can only really trust what I'm doing. I can't know what anybody else is going to do. You know, I can trust to a certain level, but humans are flawed. I'm flawed, all of us are flawed, but I can trust myself. And the stronger that self-esteem and that self-respect is, the better my witchcraft can become. The more defined it can become, the more potent that witchcraft becomes, because I know that I can trust myself. I can trust that spell is going to work. I know this ritual means something. It has some gravitas to it that says this is important. The dedication I did, the rededication I did, all of the practices that I do now are in support and honoring those things. It's honoring the celestial court, it's honoring witchcraft, it's honoring this community. It's all of those pieces are part of that piety, are part of that religious practice. So how does communing with the divine affect my witchcraft? It's a lot of those things. So in the Celestial Nexus, the big writing that I have that explains all of what I'm doing in my system is that there's a celestial court, all of the planets and that sort of thing. Like I was mentioning earlier, I'm working with today, so each morning I set an intention. I look at the transits that are happening for that day, and then I choose something. I go through the list of planets and asteroids, and I look at them and I see where are the things I need to do. Am I doing work today? Am I doing religious stuff? What am I doing, right? And then I'm looking for the support from those things, the overseeing of that, the auspices of those things, requesting the prayers for community or for church or for coven. And I set those things every single day. Prayer. Prayer is an odd one, right? If prayer is scary for you, you can just say meditation, because lo and behold, they're rather similar. There's a lot of differences between them, and there's certain specificity between each one of those. So prayer, spell, and meditation are all sort of interlinked, and they share some overlap, but they're not all exactly the same. Prayer for me comes in three major forms, which is the complaint and question, not a thing I normally do. Like, oh, why is this terrible thing happening? Why am I out of money? What have I done? Right, complaint and question. Petition, asking a deity, element, or divine source for something, right? Closer to what I do. And there's intercession. Intercessional prayer is praying on the behalf of somebody. Recently, I've done more intercessional prayer, praying for external things that aren't me, that don't have to do with me, and bringing that intention to it. Meditation shares some of these things, right? So I go to the chapel and I kneel down and I do my prayer and stuff, and I spend, 20, 30 minutes in prayer, almost an hour every single day, which I realize is now a lot, now I'm thinking about it. But what is meditation? You sit down and quiet your mind, you close those things. You may be opening the door to the divine. You may not be interacting, like in a language conversation with a deity or something, but you are in some sort of communing with that divine source, either yourself, others, doesn't really matter. So that, in that way, they're similar. I won't get way into spell definitions, but spell has some of that spontaneity and improvisation as well as prayer, but there's an emotional component to prayer of the spontaneity that happens within prayer, that you just are overwhelmed and then prayer comes out. The communing with the divine. So again, challenge those baggages that you might have with terms like prayer or religion or cult or any of those things, and really figure out what it means to you and why you're doing it. Praxis is just the art of practicing, daily consistent practice. Ritual and ceremony. There's a ritual every single day that I'm doing. Ceremony is for me, equinox and solstice. I respect the wheel of the year on all of the sabbats that are most commonly followed, because Church of Witchcraft, we're trying to support as many of the modalities as we possibly can. We can't get them all, but we'll do our best. Commonalities. There's a lot of commonalities that I was just sharing. Prayer, meditation, spell. Things that we all do, ritual, ceremony, spells, and that sort of thing, are all things that witches tend to do. Privacy and sharing, two very different things. So some people have private magic. They don't want to share with other people, and that's okay too. So I think of solitary or in group practice, that these interactions differ for me as well. So how I do a ritual or ceremony is going to be different depending on whether I'm solitary or in a group. And this also enhances and modifies witchcraft as well. In fact, I did a tarot card reading, and you can see this image on our Discord, but basically I pulled 3 reverse towers in the exact same place, 3 different decks, which is odd in that itself. But even further, what was strange is that one of my coven members did a reading, didn't realize it was about me, and they pulled the tower in the exact reverse position, in the exact position that I did, separately at a different time, which is mind-boggling to me. I don't know how that happened, I don't know why that happened, but it doesn't really matter, right? It's about that synchronicity, that connection, that consistency with the divine. And that's going to happen to everybody in the church, it seems. The ones that are, present and showing up and trying and applying themselves, they're noticing that their witchcraft is stronger, they're less tired, they're finding more synchronicity within their own practices, they're finding more devotion, discipline, and piety because they have that accountability. They know that it matters, and they're seeing results of their witchcraft and how that's being formed for themselves and seeing that success. So enhancing and modifying witchcraft, these interactions, for me, interactions with the celestial court, interactions with the community, these things are the things that show me that my witchcraft and how it interacts with my own life. Guides and answers, we can guide ourselves and answer questions that we might have. Which is in their vocation, I mentioned this last sermon as well, that the vocation is definitely a healer. There's a lot of that. How do you interact with your community? It's not just spells and magic and witchcraft for yourselves. It's also external. When you're ready to interact, or even if you want to, you don't have to, we're not telling you, but generally witches have some sort of role within their society, whether it's a healer or a guide or something along those lines. They can be the secret for people that are around them, right? Some people don't have this kind of connection. They don't have a church, they don't have a whole bunch of witches that are around, they don't have a whole bunch of insight that they get, and they're just lost wandering around the planet, doing whatever it is they do, and they need that guidance. And that's something we can do as witches and in the Church of Witchcraft to guide others in as well, and that's part of our responsibility.
Just one really interesting thing, like even in my family, my circle of family and friends, and the ones that do know that I am a witch, that I do practice witchcraft, I'm the one they go to. Didn't matter what their faith is, I'm the one they come to when they need, hey, I'm feeling sick. Tell me, what do I need, to help? Or, hey, I have a family member that has COVID. What was that tonic you told me to make? Because it made me feel better in 2 days. So I'm the one that they come to for their herbal remedies when they're not feeling good, when they're feeling sick, or if they have a family member that has an upset stomach or they can't sleep. Hey, what was that tea that you made? Or hey, what was that tonic you made? What was that combination of herbs? So it's kind of funny because even though they know that I practice and some of them don't approve, I'm still the one that they come to when they need that information. And I gladly share.
Right.
Like, hey, this is what you need, or give me your phone number, I'll message it to you, and I'll tell you exactly what you need to do. And so it's just kind of funny because it's like, oh no, what you're doing is bad, but I'm still gonna come to you because you know what to do to help with the headaches, the migraines, the upset stomach and whatnot. So it's kind of interesting.
I also put doulas and midwifery. That's right in line, in my opinion. That is straight up witchcraft.
Yeah.
I don't care if you don't call it that. You're bringing a life into this, and two life forms are not dead because of your intervention. 1,000% that's witchcraft. I don't care what anybody says, that's absolutely witchcraft. You're serving your community. You're doing those things. People come to me for dream analysis. They come to me for guidance because I do things like that really well. I can do, and magic isn't just necessarily the cool technologies that you use. It's also the communities that you build and the things that you generate. What you do with your witchcraft and what you will do with your witchcraft. Why are we doing any of these things? Not just is it for yourself to be like, oh, I can explain these things, or I have a response to crisis, or this response to something overwhelmingly emotional for me. It's also how we can do witchcraft for others and what things we generate for them. And then you can ask your question, why do we do that, right? Now you have a motivation, some reason to do your witchcraft outside yourself, because you only go so far. But connecting, like in a church, for example, there's a lot of connectivity that we have. There's a lot of power that we can derive from that. Answers and questions, not just for your own research to understand that, but also drawing on power from the church itself and the connectivity that is happening, that increase in synchronicity too, that occurs because of that proximity. So, nice. I actually have been on time on every single sermon so far, and I'm very impressed by this. So, yay, I'm glad that's happening. So answering this question, is witchcraft a vocation, a religion, or both? For me, witchcraft is both a vocation and my religion. It is a divine calling and activity that I am so called to do, and it rises to a vocation level. It's not a career. I don't necessarily make money from this. By the way, we're all donation-based, and all that money needs to go to the community anyways, because there's plenty of people that need help more than we do. So witchcraft is that vocation for me. It is something that I'm called to do. I have a divine motivation to do that. I have found the definitions that support that what I'm doing is in fact religion, and I'm good with that, but I needed to know that. I needed to have that confidence in myself, and be able to increase and enhance that religious, that connection to the divine. And by so doing, I can be a pious witch, basically. And those are words you don't normally hear. Prayer in witchcraft, like what? All the stuff that, prayer is a thing that happens in witchcraft all the time. We just don't call it that. Anybody familiar with the term, so mote it be? The same thing as amen. It's the same thing, right? Prayer is in Greek, and I have this. Prayer is, the original word is to wish. In Bitten, it's to ask in German. So prayer is to ask or to wish. So what is a prayer but a spell, right?
Yeah.
Spells, prayers, manifestation, they're all connected. They have some unique qualities to each one of them, but they are in witchcraft. We just don't use those names because they're scary or they have baggage with them. Challenge those things. When you have opposition internally to stuff, you might want to get curious about it and just go, wait a minute, why does that bother me? Right? The same thing, I do that every single day. I try to define everything by what it isn't versus what it is, because I can take things away, right? There's a quote, and I'm going to do this probably terribly, from Thoreau that says, perfection is not attained when there's more to add, perfection is attained when there's nothing left to take away. So perfection is found in the winnowing of what something is, and then you find the kernel, the true essence of the thing that you're doing, and this attaches to our spell maps as well. The true essence of the actual question you're asking. I don't need to do a money spell, I want security and stability. I don't need the money, I don't need the cotton squares. I'm not doing a spell for love, I want to be cared for and seen. Those are the things that your spell is actually really about. And so your spell map is also winnowing that away and attaining that perfect inquiry to your spell. And the perfect form of that, using these kinds of concepts. So these two things, vocation and religion, for me, are complementary. They are synonymous. They have become one and the same. They won't be for everybody, but for me, they certainly have blended, and now they are also vocation and religion. And then in my religious approach to witchcraft, I find a multitude of benefits. The potency of my witchcraft, the clarity that I get, the insight, the clear cognizance, so on and so forth, and ad infinitum. And I do that, and I want to become that same font. So every time, a font of magic as well for other witches that I'm connected to. So when I pray, and I'm praying for the church, it's not that I want the church to improve, it's that I want all of the community to improve. So just like you're radiating an antenna, right, it's boosting that signal out there, doing the best that I can to do that. And the more of us that do that, whether it's prayer or meditation or focus or intent or grace, whatever that is all that potency that's going to increase all of us and our well-being to understand and answer some of these challenges that we have. And each day presents new wonders to me in witchcraft. It bolsters my witchcraft all the time. Just like the new wonders that I see, how did two different witches in two different locations at two different time periods with 4 separate tarot decks all pull the same card at the same time? I have no idea. I have no explanation. I have a theory that it's probably quantum entanglement, but that's science and I don't want to get too off track here. But each day I find something that presents new wonders to me, new connections, understanding of the celestial court and the celestial magic that I've been using, the witchcraft that I'm doing. I keep finding new things, and I want all of those things to be available for you as well out there in YouTube land. I want you to find that same potency, those same gifts and wonders, and don't lose that. One of the biggest things that a previous cardinal had told me about children and teaching children. I said the biggest component that we must always nurture is their natural inquisitiveness and wonder, and not to remove that by a whole bunch of distinctions and definitions and terms. They're already doing magic of their own accord. My nephew, for example, has never read tarot in his life, and I did a reading for them this last Thursday, and he was pulling out words. I feel this card represents suffering, misunderstanding, loneliness, and he was on point with every single one. He's never seen a tarot deck in his life. They do magic of their own accord. They already are connected to that ethereal all source, whether it's witchcraft or magic or energy or quantum, it doesn't matter. He's connected to that at some level, and to make sure that we are nurturing and respecting children's innate ability to do that and not taking away that and getting it all frustrated with all these definitions and stuff. They don't need any of that. For us, we do, because we're a little bit more, we've got a lot more baggage coming in. We have to sort of sort through that. And all those wonders, they bolster my witchcraft. They inform me, keep doing those things. You keep seeing these manifestations. I see the spells worked, 3 times in a row, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this goes in the Book of Shadows. I see that, and it strengthens my resolve in pious witchcraft. I find solace and reprieve, and this restores my syncretic form. Syncretic form is part of the celestial. Basically, it's like everything that makes you the best version of you that can be at that moment in time. And every single time I find solace and reprieve through witchcraft in that syncretic form. And so I keep doing that. Remember, it was about those moods and motivations that seem uniquely real. Those are the moods, motivations that I'm talking about, right? I find solace, I find restoration in those things when I'm stressed, or if I just want to celebrate what is, right? Whether that's a shooting star or a constellation, even if nothing is happening, that brings me solace and reprieve. It brings me more stability and comfort in my own life. It gives me some reason to keep going in the land of nihilist stoicism that I sort of exist in. It gives me some reason to exist, to be a beacon of witchcraft as well. And that is something that all of you can do, and all of you as well, is to become that beacon of witchcraft, whatever that looks like for you, because you get to be the example, the paragons of witchcraft, and that's your job. That's what we do. Because wouldn't you want that for somebody else? Don't you want to have the answers and reprieve that you get, the solace that you get, the power that you have, the potency, that connection? Do you want that for other people, or do you just want to hide away, keep it under the table? You want, let's go ahead and actually answer that question. What do you think? Do you want to give that, do you want others to have that same experience?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I think too many people are asking for money for their own witchcraft, and there's a lot of scams out there, and I feel like it's more of a calling to give it out for free, because why not? I mean, if it's going to help better you.
I know, like, for myself, like even my own mother, because I've become more serious about it in the past 2 years. She's like, I've noticed like a huge change in you. Like, it's good. You're more grounded, you're centered, you're more calm. And to me, I think it's easy for people to see you or to look at the outside and not understand, to misunderstand what witchcraft is, because Hollywood doesn't help with that, the media doesn't help with that, but for somebody to see me and be like, hey, that person's changed, it's been a good change, what are you doing that's different? It's like, well, and I've told a few people, witchcraft has changed my life.
Yes.
And it's not in the way that you're thinking witchcraft is, I said, take everything that you know about witchcraft and throw it out the window, because what we've been told about it is nothing what it is. I said, it's energy, it's understanding yourself, it's healing yourself, so that way you can become a better person for yourself and others.
Right.
I said, so it's a lot of energy work, and I know it's done wonders for myself, and I would love to share that with other people, but they have to, a lot of people are scared about it, like I said, because of what the media tells them or what their misconceptions of it are, and it's like if they just willingly just listen and understand with an open mind, what a better place world could be. And if I can share that with somebody, it's there, it's free. Because I think a lot of times they say, oh, well, witches are Wiccans. I'm like, no, we're not. Not all of us. Some Wiccans are witches. Some witches are Wiccans, but just because you practice witchcraft, you don't have to be part of any religion.
Right.
Organized religion.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's why we do these things, right? We can't force witchcraft on people. I mean, you can probably try, but man, is that going to go so bizarre and off kilter? Please don't do that. Just be the example, show that change, be that beacon, and then people can decide for themselves if they want to be part of that. It speaks for itself. The witchcraft that we use speaks for itself from the things that we generate. They see that and they want to be a part of that because they go, wait a minute, you might have something there. And that could come from any religion. It's not just witchcraft, right? So.
I've never seen anybody in this community go door to door, which is what you're referring to now, I think. It's more of an organic growth, and that's the way that I've been thinking about it recently. I like that kind of interactivity. I don't go around like giving knowledge to everybody I come across, I look for synergies and synchronicities that arise during personal connections, and I've seen it kind of alleviate a weight off of some people's shoulders, coming to realizations about things and the nature of the world around them. Sometimes complex concepts have more simple answers than you think, but you have to have that kind of a mindset in order to understand.
Right, I would agree, and that's what we want. We want to share that with other people. We want other people to have that connectivity, and so we show them by example. And that's the best way we can do that without, causing a whole bunch of havoc and trying to argue with each other about, well, my witchcraft's better than yours and whatever. Like, none of that matters. It's your own divine relationship. That's your business. It's not anybody else's business to deal with. So do that. Be that example and keep spreading that, and more for being that example and being that beacon that you can be. Any final thoughts or questions?
There's synchronicity, fate, or vice versa.
Oh, say that question one more time.
I said, is synchronicity fate or vice versa? Like,
I think they're separate things. I think synchronicity doesn't necessarily require fate, right? Because you can be synchronous with a thing, and it doesn't necessarily mean that was fated to occur. Maybe it does. I don't tend to adhere to fate or luck, chance, hope. I just threw those out the window. Not saying they don't exist, they totally exist, I just choose not to adhere to them. But synchronicity is something that doesn't necessarily require fate. I think it could include it potentially. I think they may be interlinked at some level or another. Do you think that was, is that kind of how you think about it?
I don't know. That's why I wanted to see what other people thought, because I feel like a lot of people could see synchronicity as fate. So I'm not sure what my own answer is.
It's good. Ask questions. And again, like I said earlier, we don't necessarily need to have the answer for it. Just the fact that we use the question. We all want critical thinkers, especially the Synod. We definitely want to engender critical thinking. We want you thinking and not taking our answers verbatim and saying, nope, that's what Synod said. They're the ones, they're the paragons, which is like, no. We want you to think and have critical understanding of whatever it is that you're doing. We will do our best to assist that, and we don't want to interfere or get in the way of that. So we want that because, we don't want to have to, it's too much energy. We want you to use your energy and your magic and your witchcraft for yourself instead of relying on other things. And if you do initially, that's fine too. It's a good springboard, a good jumping off point into being more independent or autonomous if you need something that was formed at the beginning that has a little more structure to it until you're ready to go on your own way and do whatever it is you're going to do with that. Well, thank you again, YouTube and Internet, for watching this, everybody who's in the future. Again, I'm Andrews from the Church of Witchcraft, and we have an active Discord that you can be a part of. We have Facebook available. All of our YouTube sermons, or all of our sermons are up on YouTube and available to everybody, so please go watch those, and it would make your life a lot easier if you subscribe and like stuff below, because otherwise you're going to get enormous amounts of emails from us, and it's way easier for notifications to manage on your own. So do that. We are also donation-based, so if you guys have ability to donate or want to donate, please, by all means do. It helps us keep the occult library going. It helps us run YouTube and all of the other stuff that we're doing and making sure that we're adding into the community, because everything that comes to us just goes back to you guys in general, supporting other witches and doing teaching stuff and guest speakers and all that stuff. So thank you for listening and being here, and we will see you at the next sermon.